Raised my kids with wealth. Now they have no ambition. Took away their inheritance until they learn to be adults. Hey Reddit. I'm a 57M, father, and an entrepreneur. I've been running my own company for over 30 years, and I'd say I've done pretty well for myself. My wife, 54F, and I have been married for 31 years, and we have two adult children, Ryan, 29M, and Sophia, 27F. I didn't grow up wealthy, but when my parents passed away, they left me a significant inheritance. That money played a big role in helping me build my business into what it is today. So financially, we're more than comfortable. But this wasn't just a nice little bonus. It was the kind of wealth that, if mismanaged, could disappear in an instant. My wife and I have always believed in hard work. We came from modest backgrounds and built everything from scratch. We wanted to provide our kids with opportunities we never had. But looking back, I'm starting to wonder if we went too far. And that's why I'm here. I need some advice. My parents were well off, not billionaires, but they lived comfortably. Most of their wealth was in real estate, which was much cheaper back then. However, I made a conscious decision not to touch my inheritance until I had built something of my own. I wanted to prove, to myself, and maybe even to my parents, that I could make it on my own. So, I worked day and night, sacrificing sleep and personal time to build my company from the ground up. Now, it's thriving. We've always lived well, and we made sure Ryan and Sophia never lacked anything. They attended the best schools, had access to every possible opportunity, and never experienced real hardship. But here's where the problem started. Once I started making real money, I wanted them to have the life I never had. They got the best education, wore designer clothes, and never had to worry about expenses. We set up trust funds for them at birth, so by the time they turned 21, they had more money in their accounts than I did at that age. Ryan and Sophia grew up in an entirely different world from mine. They never had to take summer jobs or worry about paying for school, and now, as adults, they're coasting through life without real jobs or ambition. They exist in a privileged bubble, completely disconnected from reality. I had always hoped that as they got older, they'd develop the drive to build something for themselves. But that hasn't happened. Ryan spends his days hanging out with friends, traveling, and splurging on expensive gadgets, while Sophia is obsessed with social media, chasing an influencer lifestyle that lacks any real depth. They're entitled, unmotivated, and, frankly, out of touch. They've never had to struggle, and it's painfully obvious. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my kids. But watching them waste their potential is frustrating. They don't understand the value of anything because they've never had to earn it. My wife, bless her heart, is more patient than I am. She believes they'll figure it out with time, but I'm not so sure. That's why I finally decided to take action. Everything came to a head a couple of weeks ago at a family dinner. My wife and I were casually discussing retirement plans. Not making any serious decisions, just throwing ideas around about what life might look like when we eventually step away from the business. As expected, Ryan and Sophia weren't paying attention until I brought up the topic of the inheritance. Suddenly, they were fully engaged. I mentioned the idea of them taking over the business one day, but they immediately dismissed it. Ryan laughed and said he had no interest in wasting his life working, while Sophia scoffed, saying she was too focused on her career to even consider it. I could feel my frustration rising. I asked them what their long-term plans were, and they just shrugged. Ryan smirked and said he didn't need to work because his trust fund covered everything. Sophia, on the other hand, insisted she was building her brand, whatever that actually meant. That was the moment it hit me. My biggest mistake wasn't just giving them too much, but giving it to them too soon. When I was their age, I was working 12-hour shifts, learning everything I could to get ahead. I was up before sunrise, managing projects and putting in the effort to build something from the ground up. Meanwhile, my kids seemed perfectly content to drift through life, living off the fortune they had done nothing to earn. I tried to reason with them, to explain that life isn't just about coasting on what you've been given. But they weren't having it. They made it clear that they had no intention of ever working real jobs or contributing to anything meaningful. It felt like talking to a brick wall. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had completely failed them. These were grown adults acting like entitled teenagers. I had spent decades building a legacy that could have given them stability and opportunity, but instead of valuing it, they were just squandering everything. Something had to change, immediately. The next morning, I sat down with my wife and laid it all out. We needed to draw a line, or they were going to end up as directionless, entitled adults with no real future. She wasn't thrilled. She's always been the more patient one. But after a long discussion, she agreed that something needed to be done. At the next family dinner, I made it clear. Things were changing. From that moment forward, Ryan and Sophia wouldn't get another dime unless they held down real, full-time jobs for at least 2 years. And by real jobs, I meant positions that had nothing to do with our family business. No favors, no cushy office jobs from family friends. They needed to find work, earn a paycheck, and prove they could function in the real world. Their reactions were priceless. Ryan scoffed, like I had just told him the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. Sophia stared at me in shock, like I had grown a second head. I laid it out for them in no uncertain terms. This was non-negotiable. They could either step up and prove they were capable of standing on their own, or they could forget about ever seeing another cent from us. Ryan was the first to explode. He slammed his fork down and accused me of holding their futures hostage. Sophia, never one to back down, insisted I was trying to ruin her life because I didn't understand how things work now. My wife, trying to play peacemaker, suggested finding a compromise. But I didn't budge. I told them this wasn't about punishment. It was about preparing them for the real world. Whether they liked it or not, this was happening. Ryan and Sophia didn't stick around long after that. They both stormed out, furious, shouting about how I was ruining their lives. My wife just looked at me, torn between frustration and admiration. I told her I wasn't doing this to punish them. I just wanted them to grow up. But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the doubt creeping in. Had I just made a huge mistake? The fallout was immediate. Ryan and Sophia didn't speak to us for a week, which was unusual given how much they usually relied on us. My wife struggled with the situation. She wanted to support me, but she also hated the tension with the kids. In the end, she stood by me. As difficult as it was, she agreed that they needed a wake-up call. When Ryan finally did reach out, it wasn't to apologize, it was to argue. He told me I was being unfair, and that expecting him to get a real job was setting him up for failure. He insisted that I didn't understand how difficult things were for his generation, how the job market had changed, and how I was making his life harder for no reason. I listened, but I didn't waver. I told him that everyone has to start somewhere, and that if he was serious about his future, he'd find a way to make it work. Sophia took a different approach. Instead of confronting me directly, she tried to go through her mother. She told my wife that she had always supported her brand, and that I was sabotaging her career by forcing her into something she didn't want to do. My wife, as always, tried to be diplomatic, but in the end, she told Sophia what I had been saying all along. She needed to stop depending on us and start figuring things out for herself. Neither of them took it well. Ryan accused us of being out of touch. Sophia insisted we were actively trying to destroy her future. Then they both did something I never thought they'd do. They threatened to cut us out of their lives entirely. That stung. But we didn't back down. We told them this wasn't negotiable. If they wanted any part of their inheritance, they had to prove they could stand on their own 2 feet. Now, we're at a standoff. My wife is trying to keep the peace, but the kids refuse to budge. They think we're being cruel and unreasonable, and they aren't afraid to let us know it. A part of me feels guilty, like maybe I went too far. But deep down, I know this is the right thing to do. They need to learn how to be independent, even if it means resenting us for a while. So, Reddit, am I wrong for giving my kids this ultimatum? I want what's best for them, but I also don't want to lose them. Did I push too hard? Or is this the tough love they need? Update 1 month later. After I first posted about the situation with my kids, things took an even more complicated turn. Ryan and Sophia, still furious over my ultimatum, decided to involve the extended family. They went straight to my in-laws and even reached out to some of my cousins, venting about how unfairly they were being treated. It didn't take long before I started receiving phone calls and messages from various relatives, some of whom I hadn't heard from in months, suddenly eager to share their opinions. My in-laws were the first to reach out. They wanted to understand what was happening. My father-in-law, who has always had a soft spot for the kids, thought I was being too harsh and suggested I cut them some slack. My mother-in-law, however, had a very different stance. She had seen firsthand how entitled Ryan and Sophia had become and worried that if we continued to enable them, they'd never learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. Then my cousins started chiming in. One of them, who's practically a brother to me, admitted he understood my perspective but warned that I might be pushing Ryan and Sophia too far. He reminded me that our generation grew up with different values, and that I needed to be more mindful of the pressures young people face today. Another cousin, a successful attorney, didn't hold back. He outright accused me of trying to control my kids' lives. He argued that I should let them figure things out on their own, even if that meant they failed. Despite the mixed reactions, I held firm. I explained to everyone that this wasn't about control. It was about ensuring Ryan and Sophia had the skills and resilience to succeed on their own. I wasn't expecting them to become executives overnight. I just wanted them to hold down a steady job and contribute to society. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I believed it was necessary. Unsurprisingly, Ryan and Sophia didn't take this lying down. Ryan, always the more impulsive of the two, decided he was going to prove me wrong by starting his own business. He latched onto day trading after reading stories online about people making fortunes overnight. He poured whatever little savings he had into it, convinced he'd turn a quick profit. But within weeks, it was obvious he was in way over his head. He lost nearly everything, and then had the nerve to call me, asking for more money to invest. I told him no. This wasn't the kind of work I had been talking about. He hung up on me, and we haven't spoken much since. Sophia took a different approach. Instead of diving into risky investments, she started attending endless networking events, which, from what I could tell, were little more than fancy social gatherings where people sipped cocktails and hyped up their personal brands. She insisted she was making valuable connections that would boost her career, but I saw it for what it was, just another way to avoid doing any real work. When I asked her how these events were translating into actual job opportunities, she got defensive and accused me of not believing in her. I told her I believed in hard work, not playing pretend. At this point, it was obvious. They were both looking for loopholes. Ryan and Sophia wanted the inheritance without putting in the effort, and watching them waste time on these half-baked attempts to succeed was beyond frustrating. But no matter how difficult it was to see them struggle, I wasn't backing down. As the weeks went on, their calls became less frequent, and when they did reach out, the conversations usually turned into heated arguments. They both tried to guilt-trip my wife and me, insisting that we were abandoning them and that they couldn't believe we were ruining our family over money. Ryan even went so far as to suggest he might cut us out of his life completely if we didn't change our stance. My wife was devastated, but I could also see her perspective shifting. She had always been the peacemaker, trying to find middle ground, but even she was starting to grow frustrated with their entitled attitudes. We both knew this wasn't just about the money. It was about their futures, and we couldn't let them continue down this path. Still, it wasn't easy hearing our kids threaten to sever ties with us when all we wanted was for them to become independent. At one point, Sophia even tried to turn some of our friends against us. She told them we were being unreasonable, that we didn't understand how difficult it was to find a job nowadays, and that we were setting her up to fail. Some of our friends, especially those with kids in a similar situation, were sympathetic to her, which only made things more complicated. Suddenly, it felt like the whole world had opinions on our family drama. Despite the pressure, my wife and I stood our ground. We knew that if we caved now, we would only reinforce the very behavior we were trying to break. But I won't lie, it was tough. There were moments when I wondered if we had made a mistake. To push things even further, we made another big decision. Up until now, Ryan and Sophia had been receiving generous monthly allowances, which they used for everything, from rent to shopping sprees. If we truly wanted them to learn how to be independent, that had to stop. So we cut them off. We also canceled the credit cards linked to our accounts. If they wanted to maintain their current lifestyles, they'd have to figure out a way to pay for it themselves. The reaction was instant. Ryan called me, furious, accusing us of trying to bankrupt him. Sophia sent a long, emotional email, saying we were heartless and that she had no idea how she was supposed to survive without our support. My wife and I sat down and read it together. And while it was hard to see her so upset, we knew this was exactly what needed to happen. We responded simply, "This is part of growing up, and we believe in you." For the first time, they were forced to face the reality of limited funds. Ryan could no longer afford his expensive hobbies, and Sophia had to drastically cut back on her extravagant social life. They were both angry, hurt, and completely unprepared. But we could only hope this would be the wake-up call they desperately needed. It was a tough love approach, but we truly believed it was the only way to get through to them. So, Reddit, what do you think? Are we being too harsh, or is this exactly what they need? I'm standing firm on my decision, but this is definitely taking a toll on our family. I'd appreciate any advice or insight. Update 2, 6 months later. Hey Reddit, thanks for all the support and advice over the past few months. It's been a rough ride, but I figured it was time to update you on what's been happening since my last post. First off, I want to say that I did take some of your suggestions to heart, especially the ones about balancing tough love with emotional support. So, here's where we stand. Let's start with Ryan. After our last major argument, he completely withdrew. He stopped returning calls, and when we did manage to reach him, it was clear he was still furious. I knew he was struggling, but I also knew he needed to figure things out for himself. So we gave him space. About 2 months after we cut him off, reality finally set in. His savings were drying up, and without any financial help from us, he was forced to look for a job. At first, he aimed high, applying for high-paying jobs in industries where he had zero experience. But when those didn't pan out, he had to lower his expectations. Eventually, he landed a job at a local warehouse. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't what he wanted, but it was a real job, with real hours and a real paycheck. The first few weeks were brutal. Ryan complained nonstop about the physical labor, the early mornings, and the repetitive nature of the work. He hated every second of it, and he made sure we knew it. But my wife and I stayed firm, encouraging him to push through and reminding him that everyone has to start somewhere. Slowly, but surely, he started to adjust. He began taking some pride in his work, and though he'd never admit it outright, I could tell he was starting to understand the value of earning his own way. He's been at the warehouse for about 4 months now. While it's still not his dream career, he's no longer talking about quitting every single day. He's even started putting aside a little of his paycheck, something he had never done before. It's a small step, but it's progress, and I'm proud of him for sticking with it. He's not fully there yet, but for the first time, I see glimpses of the responsible adult I always knew he could be. Now, on to Sophia. Her journey has been different, but no less challenging. After we cut off her allowance and canceled her credit cards, she tried to keep up appearances for a while. She was still posting on social media about her glamorous life, but it became painfully obvious that things were starting to fall apart behind the scenes. Eventually, the illusion crumbled. The networking events dried up once people realized she wasn't actually in a position to offer anything valuable in return. And the parties? They weren't nearly as fun when she couldn't afford to keep up with the crowd. It was a harsh wake-up call, and for a while, she seemed completely lost. But then, something interesting happened. One of the contacts she had made at a networking event told her about an entry-level position at a marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't the influencer lifestyle she had been chasing, but it was a job. After a lot of convincing, and plenty of encouragement from my wife, she finally decided to apply. She applied, and to her surprise, she got the job. The first few weeks were rough. Sophia wasn't used to taking orders from anyone, and the structure and deadlines of the workplace were a major adjustment for her. More than once, she called us in tears, frustrated with her boss, overwhelmed by the workload, convinced she had made a mistake. But just like with Ryan, we stayed firm. We reassured her that this was part of growing up and encouraged her to keep pushing forward. Over time, she started to find her footing. She's been at the firm for about 3 months now, and while she's far from loving it, she's starting to recognize the value of what she's doing. She even mentioned looking into some courses to develop her skills, a huge step for her. With both Ryan and Sophia now working, there's been a noticeable shift in our family dynamic. Our once tense, awkward family gatherings have slowly become more relaxed. There's still some lingering frustration. Neither of them is thrilled about their new realities, but there's also a sense of relief. My wife and I have made a conscious effort to be there for them as much as possible, offering guidance, but without giving in or bailing them out. And I think, slowly but surely, they're beginning to appreciate that. One unexpected outcome of all this? Ryan and Sophia have started to bond in a way they never did before. They've always been close, but this is different. They're commiserating over work, sharing their struggles, and even giving each other advice. Instead of just leaning on us, they're leaning on each other, which is something I never expected but am incredibly grateful to see. Even our extended family is starting to come around. The relatives who originally criticized our decision are beginning to see the benefits. They've noticed the changes in Ryan and Sophia and have even commented on how much more mature they seem. My wife and I still have moments of doubt. This has not been an easy journey, but overall, we're feeling more confident that we made the right call. I won't lie, watching my kids struggle has been hard. There have been nights where I questioned if we pushed too far. But now that I see them slowly figuring things out for themselves, I know we did the right thing. I know they're not fully there yet, but they're making progress. And that's all I could ever ask for. So, that's where things stand for now. I know this journey isn't over, and there will be more challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. Thanks again for all the advice and support. It's been invaluable as we navigate this situation. I'll keep you all posted if anything major happens. In the meantime, any thoughts on how we can continue to support Ryan and Sophia without coddling them would be greatly appreciated. Update 3 1-year mark. Hey Reddit, I'm back with another update. It's been about a year since this whole thing started, and I wanted to share where things stand now. First off, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been following our journey and offering advice. This past year has been challenging, but it's also been a time of growth for all of us. Recently, we had a big family meeting to check in on how things were going. It was the first time my wife, Ryan, and Sophia had all sat down together like this since the inheritance ultimatum began. I won't lie, I was nervous. I had no idea how they'd react, or if they'd even be open to talking about their progress. But to my surprise, the conversation went better than expected. I started by telling them how proud I was of the progress they'd made over the past year. Ryan has stuck with his job at the warehouse. While he's not exactly passionate about it, he's made some real progress. His boss even told me, through a mutual acquaintance, that Ryan has been doing a great job. He's developing a strong work ethic, he's started saving money, and he's even considering taking night classes to improve his skills. Sophia, on the other hand, has really found her footing in the marketing world. She's still at the same firm, but she's taken on more responsibility and even led a couple of small projects. For the first time, she's talking about her job with pride, something I had never heard from her before. She's also enrolled in online courses to sharpen her skills, and she's finally starting to see the value in working her way up rather than expecting success to come overnight. We also revisited the inheritance conditions, just to make sure everyone was on the same page. I made it clear that nothing had changed, 2 full years of consistent, real work before they could access their inheritance. Both Ryan and Sophia accepted it without argument. It was a huge relief. I could tell they weren't exactly thrilled about it, but they also weren't fighting it like they were before. Then, something unexpected happened. Ryan mentioned that his boss had been talking to him about a promotion. It's not a massive leap, but it would mean more responsibility and a pay raise. He seemed shocked that he was even being considered, but I wasn't. I've seen the changes in him over the past year, and I'm not at all surprised that his hard work is being noticed. He's still figuring things out, but for the first time, he's thinking long-term, not just about fulfilling the inheritance conditions, but about actually building a career for himself. Sophia also had some exciting news. She's discovered a real passion for her work in marketing, particularly the creative side of it. She's been talking to her boss about transitioning into a more specialized role, and she's even considering going back to school to earn a degree in marketing. This is a huge shift from the Sophia of a year ago, who was more focused on social media clout than on building a real career. It's been incredible to watch these changes unfold. They're both starting to find their own way, and while they still have a long road ahead, they're making progress I never would have imagined a year ago. One of the most unexpected and rewarding outcomes of this entire experience has been the improvement in our family dynamics. There's now a genuine connection that wasn't there before. Our conversations have become deeper, more meaningful, and far less focused on money or material things. Ryan and Sophia are starting to see us not just as a source of financial support, but as parents who truly care about their futures and their happiness. We've also noticed a positive change in their relationship with each other. They've always been close, but in the past, there was always a competitive edge between them, fueled by who could get more from us or who could live the most extravagant lifestyle. Now, instead of competing, they're supporting each other in ways we never saw before. They've even started discussing the idea of working together on some side projects, combining Ryan's practical skills with Sophia's creativity. It's still early, but it's encouraging to see them thinking about collaboration rather than simply relying on us. This whole experience has also strengthened my relationship with my wife. We've had to make some tough choices as a team, and while we haven't always agreed on everything, we've learned how to communicate better and support each other through the difficult moments. It's been a learning experience for both of us, not just as parents, but as partners. So, Reddit, this is where we are right now. I'm hopeful for the future, but I know we're not out of the woods yet. The next year will be crucial, especially as Ryan and Sophia approach the 2-year mark of their inheritance conditions. We'll continue to support them as best we can, and I'll keep you all posted on how things progress. If anyone has advice on how to keep this momentum going without falling back into old habits, I'd love to hear it. Update 4, Final Update. Hey Reddit, it's been 2 years since I first came to you for advice, and I wanted to give you one final update. It's been a long journey, and I can't express how grateful I am for all the support, wisdom, and insights you've shared along the way. This experience has been challenging, but it's also been incredibly rewarding. As the 2-year mark approached, there was a sense of anticipation in our family. Ryan and Sophia both knew that the inheritance conditions were about to be revisited. They didn't bring it up much, but I could tell it was on their minds. They've come such a long way since that difficult dinner when I first laid down the law, and I was eager to see how they'd handle this final test. A few weeks before the deadline, we had one last family meeting. I wanted to sit down with Ryan and Sophia, hear about their experiences over the past 2 years, and talk about what comes next. My wife and I were nervous, but hopeful. We've seen so much growth in them, but we also knew this was a critical moment. When we sat down, I started by acknowledging how far they'd come. Ryan and Sophia both looked a little uneasy, but there was pride in their eyes. They knew they had worked hard, and I wanted to make sure they understood that we recognized and appreciated that. Ryan spoke first. He talked about his job at the warehouse, how he had started seeing it as more than just a means to an end. Since my last update, he had been promoted twice. While it still wasn't his dream job, he was starting to see the value in hard work and steady progress. He's also been taking on side projects, using the skills he's developed at work to build something of his own. For the first time, it's clear that he's thinking about his future in a way he never had before. Then, Sophia shared her story. She's still at the marketing firm, but she's transitioned into a more specialized role, focusing on creative campaigns. She's also taken college courses in marketing and design and has discovered a real passion for what she's doing. Sophia has always been creative, but now she's channeling that creativity into something tangible, something that could lead to a career she's truly proud of. After they finished, my wife and I shared our thoughts. We told them how proud we were of their progress, of how they'd faced challenges and grown from them. We reminded them that this journey wasn't just about the money. It was about preparing them for whatever comes next. Then, I surprised them. I told them that because of the growth we've seen in them, we were increasing their inheritance. I explained that this wasn't just a reward for making it through the 2 years, but a recognition of the people they've become. They were shocked, and maybe a little overwhelmed. But more than anything, they were grateful. For the first time, I felt like they truly understood the value of what they were being given. Not just the money, but the lessons they learned along the way. So, where are we now? Ryan and Sophia are both in a much better place than they were 2 years ago. Ryan is still working at the warehouse while building his own projects on the side. He's even talking about starting his own business someday. Sophia is thriving at her marketing firm and is considering pursuing a degree full-time. They've both grown so much, and I couldn't be prouder. So, this is it. My final sign-off. Thank you for following our story and for all the help and advice along the way. If there's one thing I'd leave you with, it's this. Don't hesitate to challenge your kids, even when it's tough. Sometimes, the hardest choices bring the greatest growth. Wishing you all the best on your own parenting journeys. I hope they're just as fulfilling and eye-opening as ours has been. Take care, Reddit. And who knows, maybe I'll be back with another story someday.